Games You Might Have Missed is a series where I highlight a great game that may have escaped your notice. If you have any suggestions for games you think should be featured in this series, be sure to pop it in the comments section. But today, we're going to be talking about Nioh. Nioh only came out like 6 weeks ago. How could we possibly have missed it? Well, because Q1 of 2017 has been absolutely insane for game releases, especially for JRPG fans. It simply had bad timing, and being a new IP, it couldn't sell on name alone. It was praised to high heaven when it first came out though, and I saw plenty of coverage for it like a week after release, but it's been dead silent since then, and it's a shame because it's easily on par with some of the best games released this year. Calling it a Dark Souls clone is somewhat unfair because it was actually in development for a damn long time, since 2004 if you can believe it, and it was developed by the team behind Ninja Gaiden, and Ninja Gaiden was basically Dark Souls before there was Dark Souls. Hold up a minute if you are immediately put off by the Dark Souls comparison. I'll be honest with you, I suck at these games, and while I have played some Dark Souls, I've never been able to fully get into it because I simply don't have the patience. I've found Nioh to be a little more forgiving in that area though. It's still an immensely hard game, and some of the bosses are especially insane, but it never seemed to bother me that much. I died here and there, but didn't feel as if I'd lost a huge amount of time. Now, whereas Dark Souls generally focuses on a Western motif, Nioh is very Japanese. The setting, aesthetics, and style of Nioh are fantastic. It's set in a sort of fantasy world version of Japan during the Sengoku period, which was already one of the most grisly, dark, and intense periods in Japan's history, without the addition of demons and magical powers. The combat is obviously the main draw of Nioh, and it's actually really fun. Even for a person like me that generally doesn't do too well in these games, I found that for basic enemies or encounters, you are going to figure them out in one death or less. It isn't needlessly difficult, and as long as you proceed with caution and apply what you've already learned from past encounters, you should coast along just fine until you reach one of the trickier enemies or bosses. It's all based around weapon combat. There are your usual array of weapons, swords, axes and spears, but you do have a couple of curveballs in there. They all have distinct combos and attacks, and each weapon also has its own talent tree of sorts. You can also employ 3 different stances. The stances not only change some of your stats, but your weapons also attack differently. Using the high stance will boost your attack and lower your defense, but all your attacks will also become more powerful, with the drawback of being slower, leaving you susceptible to counterattack. Changing stances is quick and easy, even in the midst of combat, but with everything that's going on, I did find myself setting and forgetting. There isn't any reason you couldn't finish this game while using only one stance though. There is a bunch of stuff I haven't mentioned about the combat, like magic and range combat with bows and guns and ninja powers, and a million other things, but you could talk for 8 hours about all its nuances and you'd still have a lot more to talk about. The game does a good job with pacing, and the best way to learn is simply to play it. The story is probably the most underappreciated thing about Nioh. While it isn't exactly narrative heavy, it definitely has more of a story focus than the Dark Souls games. Nioh is like a nice compromise between Dark Souls and a more traditional JRPG. There are some really cool characters in Nioh and some really awesome cutscenes. It definitely kept me intrigued. Nioh is also one of the best performing games on the PS4. It looks great and runs really well. I don't think I have ever experienced a stutter or frame drop. It's incredibly smooth for such an ambitious game, but it's also integral to the experience since there is such a strong focus on the difficult combat. So if you haven't played Nioh yet, give it a shot. If you like Dark Souls or Ninja Gaiden, you aren't going to be disappointed, and for those people out there a little too intimidated of Dark Souls, Nioh is probably a better entry point into the subgenre. And speaking of subgenre, or maybe just sub, you should definitely subscribe to see more of me and everything I do. Be sure to leave your suggestions in the comment section, like this video if you liked it, and if you enjoy my content, why not consider supporting my channel on Patreon. Other than that, I'll see you all soon.